Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luka. Luka, 2026 Bills training camp is in the books, at least the away from Orchard Park portion of it at St. John Fisher. The blue and red scrimmage is in the book, so we have a lot of information on these Bills. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good. I mean, we're recording this on Sunday the 9th. By the time anyone's listening to this, pretty much, I will have officially crossed the mark of 34 years old. So that's something. But it's I love that we are now getting into we actually can take away things from day-to-day practices. I think this is where early training camp trends start to become trends that are either smothered away real quick and it was like, hey, this was just a no pads phase, I guess would be the way to put it, and or pun intended, it's something that's trending in an upward direction that we can actually look at as potentially a thing and is going to not go away. And as we approach preseason games, really keep an eye on the linebackers, the secondary, whatever it is, the wide receivers, and the battle that's going on for that position group. It's those things that now the words are going to speak louder, and what we're seeing is going to mean more now that the blue and red, the red and blue practice is done with, the St. John Fisher sessions are over with. It's like I feel like, Josh, when we get to this point in time in the preseason, this is almost like now we're getting it, you and I will get in the rhythm like we do during the regular season, where it's like week by week, day by day, it's the practice week. You're leading up to a game day. You're leading up to kind of the regular season in the large picture of things. And the rhythm of things, I feel like, is going to feel a little bit more natural, and we're going to be able to take away more meaningful information from these day-to-day practices that I enjoy, because that just means we're truly around the corner from meaningful football, because preseason football is just a taste of things that honestly is like putting vegetables in front of a child. I don't want it. Just give me the fun stuff, because I want what the games matter, and when they matter, that's the fun stuff.
It is interesting. I do this every year, and I still fall for it every year. It's like that first preseason game. Now, look, by preseason standard, that Hall of Fame game was a banger. I mean,
Yeah.
Arizona and Carolina put on a show. Carson Beck, I was not the biggest Carson Beck guy in college, but I mean, he's got the tools. We're not. This is not a Carson Beck show, but every year, without fail, it's like you look forward to Bill's training camp, right? And then like 2 or 3 practices, and like I can't get enough of Twitter. What's going on? Oh, is Skylar Bell working with the first team? Ooh, what's Caleb Alarmzor doing? And then by about 4 or 5 practices in, I'm still following it, but I'm not like waking up thinking about it. I'm really just waking up thinking, oh my God, the Commanders lost their starting left tackle. Please, Bills, don't get anybody hurt today. Oh my God, what's going on in San Francisco? Is their field really a catastrophe? Don't lose anybody today, Bills. Like that, just survive in advance. And I don't really care about like, oh, Joshua Palmer had a big day. And then the first preseason game is kind of like, okay, you hit the reset button. It's like, yeah, I get to see the team play now. And then that first preseason game happens. You get a couple drives into it, and you're like, yeah, this is something. And you like watching the new players, but also again, like just don't get anybody hurt. And then it's just the build up for the regular season. Training camp also, Luka, this is a quick transition, is about working out the kinks. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we appreciate you. If you notice my background is a little different than normal, I will let you all know that I am in the process of moving. The room you are looking at right now is the room that I used to do the recording from a Bills chat. This wall right over here that clearly needs a paint job, that's going to happen right after the recording, is where my Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs and Buffalo Bill stuff that was the backdrop of the podcast hung before. So, we had to fill in the holes and paint over it. If any of you have moved, you know the fun. But as much as Luka and I love being content creators and having a Bills room, my real estate agent advised me that getting the stuff out and making it more open to the imagination of the buyers is probably the better way to go. So that's what we're doing for this process. So I appreciate all of you for bearing with me. We toyed around with the idea of a generic background. Lucas shot it down pretty quickly. He's like, it looks like a bad team's call. People will forgive you. Just hit record. All right, Luka. along with training camp being in the books, and we'll get into injury updates, we'll get into where position battles stand, but I think the biggest story on top of mind right now was we also got the first run through for the new Highmark Stadium. And I thought it looked beautiful. I thought the shots we saw, it looked amazing. I've thought all along that the stadium just looks like a palace, as much of a palace as a stadium can look like when you know that there's not going to be a retractable roof. So if you can get that idea out of your head and then focus on all the stuff the Bills did to control the weather, control the elements. It is interesting that it just poured down rain the first night. And I love that. I mean, just for testing it out. My favorite thing about the new stadium, and it's such a minor thing, I love the fact, Luka, that the Bills and their opponent are going to come out of separate tunnels.
Yeah.
I've always hated that for the Bills and for the opponents. If you're a competitive person, like think about yourself playing flag football, softball, video games. I'm a competitive person. Whatever I do, I want to be the best. Halftime of a game where your professional life is on the line and you were like the 1% of the 1% of the 1% in the world competing at the NFL level, walking past your opponent who maybe just made a big play and danced at your expense is such a recipe for disaster. I think back to Leonard Fournette and Shaq Lawson like fighting on their way back to the locker room. That wasn't at halftime. They had both just been ejected. I think back to Brian Cox, spitting at the fans, flipping them off. Luka, we'll talk a lot about the stadium. Did you ever have an issue with like the single tunnel? I'm very happy that both teams will now exit and enter in different spots.
My take on the tunnel thing is it's an era thing, or it's, let that rest in the era of which it was constructed and came from. And the memories you have in not just the Bill Stadium, just of the eras in general and football. Because the funny part is when it comes to like old stadium construction and the idea of singular tunnel entrance, my mind actually, ironically enough, goes to Notre Dame Stadium, and you think of like Catholics versus convicts, how they have to come in through the same way. And like that stuff is awesome for the era it was and for what took place and the stories that came of it and stuff like that. It's awesome. And when you have something like a Notre Dame, you obviously do not touch as much as possible. You let it become or let it remain what it is. But when you build something new eventually, like the Bills have now, you do the modern things you should do. And one of those things, as you are bringing up here, is separate places of entry and allowing you to have that ability where that's your space, that's your access, that's your place to be. It's your place to feel safe, whether you're a home player or a visiting player as well, or staff. You want to feel as if when you're walking down that tunnel, like you would, talking about the old Highmark, you didn't feel as if you need to be aware of your surroundings, almost hyper aware. So it's like nothing wrong happens, nothing goes south, whatever. I enjoyed it from my own perspective with my own unique experiences. I thought it was really cool when I used to do some work at the stadium on game days and do things that found myself in the tunnel, and then, saying hi to Cam Newton and Marvin Jones just casually walking by. I thought that was just the coolest thing as a young adult. But then at the same time, like, it's like, that is that era thing, and that it remained with that stadium, and that's cool and all. But it's like you have a new stadium, you have a new state of the art thing. Let it have the modern luxuries that they should have. And I do like the highlight of this because you won't hear about it. It's nothing that anyone's going to write home about, but it's something that feels appropriate and it's going to be nice that you probably will get a lot less when it comes to the confrontations or issues that you would see with competitive athletes on opposite sides.
And then I also think about just as a fan attending a game. I've gone to Bills games on the road. I've gone to Bills games at home. But I mean, Bills fans travel well, like as well as like the best travel fan bases in the league, up there with the Cowboys, the Steelers, the Packers, and so on. But you think about like a playoff game, and Bills Chiefs a couple years ago in Buffalo, where the Chiefs won at the end. Fans are naturally going to gravitate at the end of the game, the ones that stick around, to where their team is coming off the field. And you're going to have one fan base that's very happy and ready to like joy and yell things, and you're going to have the people that have been drinking too much and want to take it out on the other fans. I think just separating that scene is also a good thing for everybody involved.
Good point.
All right, Luka, let's talk about the stadium and what we've seen on Twitter. Big Cat made a tweet about it too. This is just kind of the era we live in. Whatever the topic du jour of the day is, there's a lot of people out there that they whether they pretend to or truly believe they have an expertise on this. This is not a political, this is not a COVID discussion, but just think back to when COVID was a thing, and how many people in your life, whether it was Facebook, work, Twitter, wherever, would tell you whatever side of you're on, your choice, about like what the science was about wearing a mask or about what 6 feet distance. And that's just kind of the era that we're in. And that took on a new life yesterday with all the people on Twitter that were, construction experts. Well, I'm going to say this. I don't know if I didn't tell you I was going to do this on the air, but I'm not going to tell people what you do for a living. But I feel very comfortable in saying that you got a pretty strong expertise in this area. So I just want to give you the floor as somebody who, for lack of a better term, has a good background, not only obviously in the old stadium, but in the process, the behind the scenes process of this new stadium. What was your biggest takeaway? And we can get into some of your frustrations with what you saw from like the Jimmies and Joes on Twitter, but like, what was your biggest takeaway from the stadium? And just, floor is yours. What did you take away from it?
Yeah, I mean, not to pump tires. I didn't expect this. I genuinely did not. Shout out the Herberger Institute School of Design from Arizona State. That's where my design experience in the architectural world started and stuff like that. And then also I've found myself now, for what Josh is referring to, with a very long and ever building experience in the commercial audio visual and large construction world that I now currently have my day job in. Surprisingly to people who are listening, we don't do this full time. We actually have other jobs as well. And that is just the world I find myself in. So what I would say in the takeaway with this stadium and the information I have, and just from my own eyes and just experiencing things and having whatever background I have, and knowledge base that I do, I personally love a lot of things about this stadium. And what I would say is, a lot of what I see though, and what I've experienced and what I've talked to others about and stuff, are definitely going to be things that I also understand your average individual is probably never going to see, never going to note, never going to appreciate, I guess would be the way to put it. And for instance, a great example of this was, I had friends that were there because they were lucky enough where they had a family member who lives out of town, but still maintains their seasons and, was not coming up for the scrimmage. So gave them that, just wanting to see the view of their seats. And I told my friend, I was like, the one thing, like, I love the lighting system in that place. I love, naturally, of course, there's a lot of audio aspects and video aspects of that space that I enjoy too. But I told him, I was like, I appreciate things also in the architectural side of stuff and the design side of stuff, where sight lines and viewpoints, even not at seats, is something that was appreciated, considered, designed around. And I refer to it as a lot of places and a lot of concourse in that stadium has almost, if you've been to like Major League Baseball parks and things like that, where it's grandioso size, modern ones, I should say, not your Fenways or anything like that, but they're more open, and sight lines of the field are more accessible even when not at seats, and you're still at the game. You understand you're at the game. When you're walking around, you're moving around, you can see things. You don't have to, get through a tunnel, depending on your height and size, maneuver yourself around if you're not able to get to your seat around someone's shoulders or whatever to see the field itself. Sight lines are very important. And then the immersion of everything around the stadium to be an accent and highlight what actually matters, being the product on the field. And, I bring up the lighting, and I think I saw someone out there on Twitter at one point, I think it was in the media, just appreciate that it's a lot brighter for one, and it's built for prime time with how that lighting works. And I can appreciate that because I loved old Highmark, how well it handled, when you'd watch it on Sunday Night Football, how well it framed in and stuff. But there was just certain aspects of it where you could look at that game, happening in old Highmark, and then look at a primetime game happening in Atlanta, in Minnesota, and you can tell visually how different it looks. And I think this new stadium is going to frame things, light things, do everything a lot better that you will appreciate eventually over time as you watch primetime games or things like that. Even your regular games where lighting might not be optimal, whether it's, overcast, things like that. That's just one of the many dynamics and things that went into this, where every thought and process that went into that stadium construction, there are certain aspects of it that are, there for fan experience and whatnot. But the unifying goal of everything that was done in there was in mind of the product on the field. And then in terms of like obstructed views and things like that, that exists everywhere. In the world of architecture and design, a perfection and, optimal viewpoints from everywhere. Yes, that is ideal. It doesn't exist. You try to get as close to zero obstruction as possible. You try to get as close as you can to making sure everyone has the ideal view, whatever, from their particular point. But at some point, wherever, there's just going to be unfortunate circumstances where this one seat here, this one grouping here, whatever it is, and all of 0.8 to 1% of seats to 2% of seats, or whatever that number is based on total capacity, are just going to have not a perfect view. And that's just the reality of it. But it's something that's existed for a long time. And older architecture, I love that we're seeing like Dallas fans even, reply to certain people being like, hey, that stair obstructed view you have with the clear glass railing and all that stuff, that exists here. And Jerry also at that time dumped, I don't know the exact number, but I believe I remember at least eclipsing $1 billion. And that was 20 years ago now. So you think about that. And then I know in LA, for instance, it's not technically a dome stadium. And we saw things, I think it was the national championship. A few years ago, there was a college game. I want to say it was the national championship where there was rain coming in because of the wind and everything from underneath the covering, and people were getting wet at their seats without the expectation of that being possible. There's little dynamics of those kinds of things that no matter what you can do from a design perspective, it's not going to be perfect. Weather is unpredictable. And just ultimately when it comes to sight lines and stuff like that, it's not going to be perfect. I personally think they did a phenomenal job in building this particular thing for a couple of reasons. But my main plot points, just to finish this, is honestly trying to maximize sightlines as best as possible, even when not at a seat. And then also the fact that, yes, it's not the largest video board in the world. Yes, some of the things are probably not what you believe to be state of the art because of what you see in LA at SoFi or Minnesota at Bank of America or so on and so forth. But ultimately, what I think they did an incredible job is, with all of those things in mind, they aren't there to attract your direct attention. They're all there to be that framework, that surrounding accent to ultimately shape what the product is itself, being the game happening on the field or the concert that's happening on the field or wherever it is. Whatever that main event is, everything is built around it to give you the best experience possible. And I think they truly hit that one out of the park. I think I called it a masterpiece. I think masterpiece people probably hold in such high regard. I think it is just short of a masterpiece, just because a true masterpiece, true perfection just doesn't exist. And I think for everything they did for all of the things that could have happened in modern day architecture, I think they did a 9.5 out of 10 job. And it's going to be something too. I think in time, no one's going to be thinking about these things. And two, as games are happening, especially early on, people will appreciate this new stadium compared to, not trying to shit on it because everyone loves it, but the old concrete bowl shithole that we just came from in old Highmark.
And I think people need to realize too, and I'm getting this information from you. So this isn't me pretending to be an expert. This is stuff we've talked about off the air, but like the old Highmark was put up very quickly without taking into consideration, I mean, things that I never would have known was a thing, but depending on like what the coordinates are of the end zone, which way the stadium's facing, you're leaving yourself more susceptible to wind
Yep.
and weather and all those things. Things that, I mean, way above my pay grade, way above my knowledge base. But in talking to you and things like they have to consider, like they are doing their best. And sometimes to your point, the things that make the game day experience better for people are things you may never notice. And one comparison, in my line of work that I'm fairly familiar with is just think about the differences between Walmart and Target. You go to Target, the parking spaces are a little bit bigger. You go to Target, and when you roll your cart out, it rolls directly down to the parking lot. Where at Walmart, you're going over a curb. The visuals at Target, it's not like everybody just threw everything on the shelf. There's more space. The aisles are bigger. It gives you a more comfortable experience. Now you're paying for that experience. That's why you're getting a little bit more. You're paying a little bit more to go to Target than you are to go to Walmart for the same product. But Walmart is very much every time I turn this way, I'm bumping into somebody. Every time I turn this way, I'm bumping into somebody. So it's a give and a take. And, I never knew that about the two. I was always just like, why am I in such a bad mood every time I go to Walmart? And you kind of learn those things. And I think a lot of that also applied to the stadium. One question I have also is Old Highmark used to be a cell dead zone. Is that going to be the case this time around? Is there nothing they could have done about that, or is that fixed?
Oh, that is fixed. If who is it? I always forget the Twitter account. I know that I can picture it, but I saw an interaction between a couple individuals where yes, I am tweeting you right now from the Bills Stadium, and
Love it.
that's something that you never think about. You just like going to Sabres games still to this day in a packed. I joked during this past season. I missed the days when it was only 10K in here because then I could actually go on the internet and go on Twitter. But now that it's 19,070 in this arena, I can't go on Twitter during games or especially during intermissions because there's 19,000 people on the infrastructure that exists in that arena, and it just didn't work. Anyone that's been at Old Highmark understood at timeouts, end of quarters, halftime. It was so difficult to use your phone, go on Twitter, stuff like that, just because you have to remember the era of which it was built, and then you're trying to band-aid and create infrastructure, bring modern infrastructure into a space like that, a massive concrete building and structure. That's, if anyone understands how networking works and things of that nature work, it doesn't like concrete. Concrete signals do not travel well through concrete. That's just physics. So now in the modern building, there is modern infrastructure and modern technology that was brought into it that, for all of intents and purposes, no, there will be zero issues when it comes to accessing data. I believe they announced it a while ago too, like as a typical like partnership thing with the NFL and the Bills. I think Verizon is who is managing all of that side of stuff. But ultimately there's an entire server building just off of the stadium that handles all of those things. And there's also infrastructure and poles and specific things just for the stadium and the surrounding areas to support higher cellular data and wireless networking and things like that. The issues you used to have at Old Highmark when it comes to accessing the network and whatnot will not exist even at full capacity. Although that is, in my opinion, until you have a fully filled stadium, you can stress test and do all the things you want, but you need to actually have butts in seats all trying to use their phones at once or whatever to get that final test in. But I know I've heard that through testing and everything like that, no one should be having issue, or minimal individuals should be having issues, not the majority of everyone having issues just because, it's old or outdated or kind of band-aided infrastructure in a older building.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting year. I'm excited to watch the Bills in this new stadium, and I'm excited to continue to hear the reviews from people that are able to attend the games. It is not on my schedule to attend a game this year. That could change. It always could change. But where I'm located in the Midwest, for those that don't know, and buying a new house is certainly cutting into the funds. But you never know. The Bills make it to an AFC Championship game. I could go very crazy with the funds. All right, let's talk about these Bills, Luka. And this part of the show is going to be a little bit abbreviated, only because I don't think much has changed since our last show. I will say that one thing that seems to be clear is this backup quarterback job, for better or worse, is a competition. It is not just Kyle Allen. You have starts in this league. You're going to be the guy. Josh Allen, if he goes down, we're screwed anyway. It doesn't matter. Shane Buechele took a lot of reps with the second team this week. I'm open to that idea. And we've talked about this before. It's not about like Josh Allen, blows out his Achilles, is out for the year. It's about Josh Allen, whatever it is, misses 2, 3, 4 games. Who can keep this team afloat? And I do think it should be a competition between Shane Buechele and Kyle Allen. I also think the Bills should have their ear to the ground on any option available. One option I thought of this week, and I want to get your opinion on it, is Will Levis. He is a guy that kind of fits this profile of quarterbacks that fail early, get the bust tag, and then maybe a change of scenery can ignite him. So why would Will Levis be available? Well, last year the Titans used their first-round pick on Cam Ward, number 1 overall pick. So Will Levis' future there as the future starter in Tennessee is done. But when they hired Brian Daboll as offensive coordinator, the Titans went out and signed our old friend, Mitch Trubisky, as the backup quarterback and gave him a good chunk of guaranteed money, and teams generally only carry 2 quarterbacks. So the idea that Will Levis could be had for a late-round pick, or maybe you just wait him out to release him, is very realistic. We've seen now Malik Willis. We've seen Sam Darnold. I mean, if you want to throw Jared Goff in there, you can. We've seen enough examples now of early drafted quarterbacks who just kind of fizzle out, don't really amount to anything, get a new lease on life elsewhere. You want to throw Baker Mayfield in there? Fine. And really get to the best version of themselves. And I think Will Levis is an interesting idea for the Bills, one, because trait-wise, he's much more similar to Josh Allen than Kyle Allen or Shane Buechele are. And there is talent there. He was a guy that had first-round grades by a lot of NFL draft nicks. And he's young enough. He is 27, but if he were to come in and have to play for Josh Allen for, say, a month, and it goes really well, next offseason, maybe you can turn that into a second or a third-round draft pick if you trade him. There's almost no downside outside of the fact that maybe whatever, if he's worse than Kyle Allen, then you lose that. But again, like what is that to mean really? Because Kyle Allen, it doesn't have much of a floor. What do you think of the Will Levis idea? What do you think of an idea similar to that if it's not Will Levis? Do you think the Bills will consider outside options, just anything and everything on backup quarterback?
I would like to believe, or at least my opinion on it is, based on the track record of Brandon Beane, based on what we know from years past, they want one of the 2 in-house solutions to be the answer. They want either Buechele or Kyle Allen to be the answer, or at least the acceptable answer to the backup position. And I would say that is still very likely. Whether you even remember or understand it or not, technically Shane Buechele now even has NFL experience, as he did make his debut week 18 for the Chiefs last season when he was signed off of our practice squad. Many might not be aware of that because he played after Olodokun was, I believe he was banged up, and then he was cut the very next day when the season ended. But all jokes aside with that, I like that it's an open competition between the 2 of them, because I think Kyle Allen's, shine as NFL experienced, and, he went 6-0 as a starter, and only Hall of Fame quarterbacks otherwise have started their career 6-0 and gone on to do whatever they've done. And then Kyle Allen has proceeded to, maybe, I don't even know what the number is, but I'm sure it's, single digit wins ever since. I think he's got the football brain. That's why he sticks around. He was in Detroit last, I believe. He's bounced around all over the place. He clearly has an NFL mind that's good for, let's call it Monday through Saturday. And, coaches like him, he can understand offenses, so on and so forth, but nothing on the field, nothing that he's done in live play has shown you that he's capable or trustworthy of getting you out of a pinch, which is ultimately what your quarterback should be. And when I mean that, it's like a handful of series, maybe to see out a game and or, maybe get you through a game and a half, we'll call it, because say your starter got hurt in the one, it's like, oh, he missed a week, so on and so forth, like get you through that. If you have to go beyond that, a backup is a backup and you accept whatever the results that come. But I like that it's an open competition because his shine is gone, long gone. And then Shane Buechele is, for all of intents and purposes, a guy who's been around. He's basically bounced between the Bills and the Chiefs his entire career. He's played at a high D1 level. He has been productive at a high D1 level. He's also someone very familiar with Josh Allen, with the building, so on and so forth, that I like that these two guys are battling it out. And ultimately, whatever happens, I'm assuming in preseason games will give us the answer as to who wins the job. And, that's fine. When it comes to the outside solution question, I'm sure it's kind of a finger on the pulse situation. I don't know if Brandon Beane's out there trying to, replicate the Darnold style success or whatever. When, Darnold, of course, went to San Fran as a backup, got a little bit of a look due to injury reasons and, looked like in a, we'll call it appropriate NFL locker room, and with one of the great minds of the NFL, was able to turn his career around, go to Minnesota, have the year that he did, and now is a Super Bowl champ and, made a lot of money in Seattle. I think there is something in that, but I don't know if Will Levis is the reclamation project for that. I think the Mayo Eater himself may be a little bit more rough around the edges than possibly being molded. And I don't know if necessarily Joe Brady yet has the acumen to believe he could do a Kyle Shanahan, Kevin O'Connell style, kind of rebuild of someone like that. So I'm not going to sit here and say that that would even be possible when it comes to getting much more than serviceable backup play from a guy like a Will Levis. It is possible. And I'm sure if the Titans are like, hey, we just want to get him off the roster, if you want to give us like a priority 6th because we have someone offering a 7th, we'll give them to you. Like, I'm sure that is on the table if you're just not liking what you have in house. Any other ideas I have on that outside, I'm not totally aware, because I would still probably say my head and understanding how the organization works is they're 90% certain they're going to go with one of the two guys on the roster. I don't see them making a move using any level of asset to ultimately get that. Maybe if a Will Levis is a straight cut and Anthony Richardson is a straight cut, which seems like it's possible, like they would think about it, because you're not having to use any asset. You can just bring him in, do whatever you want to do and whatever you're comfortable with. That's a different discussion. But to actually move even a 7th round pick, which Brandon Beane holds very close to his heart. He loves day 3 picks. I don't see that being the route they would take if they go with someone out of house in general.
Yeah, Richardson's another really good name. I didn't mention him, but yeah, that's another one to keep an eye on, I think. Not necessarily just for the Bills, but just like teams in general.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some injuries that popped up at the blue and red scrimmage game. 2 big names. I don't know that these are going to be long-term injuries. Ty Johnson and Connor McGovern both went down with what looks like hamstring injuries, taking this both from reports I read from Banged Up Bills and Thigh Doctor, fan of both of those guys, and both of their reports aligned on they would project it to be like a 2 or 3 week absence. And obviously, with older players, with the fact that these aren't meaningful games that they're playing, I would expect the Bills to be conservative. Ty Johnson, it is what it is. The Bills offense missed him in the playoffs, in my opinion. As long as he's back by opening day or he gives himself time to ramp up, should be fine. I actually think this Connor McGovern injury could be beneficial to the Bills, because one player on the roster who you've been very high on that they haven't had a chance to see a lot of is Cedric Van Pran-Granger. And it's because of the durability of Connor McGovern. And it'll be interesting because I think this team only has one spot for Lloyd Cushenberry and Cedric Van Pran-Granger. And I think letting those guys rotate in with the ones, which is what you want to see. Like, let's see what you can do when you're next to Osiris Torrance and when you're in between Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown, you're snapping the ball to Josh Allen. That's what matters, not when you're blocking for Kyle Allen. That's what matters. Can the Bills trust one of these guys as their backup centers? My vote would be yes, but if both of these guys fail to live up to the moment, well, then you might see a situation where Austin Corbett wins the left guard battle by default, because then Alec Anderson becomes the sixth man and is your backup center. To me, there's no good time to have an injury, but this center injury situation with Connor McGovern could have some underlying benefit for the Bills.
I agree with this. And honestly, even to springboard off of that point, when it comes to a little bit of a benefit is I wonder if missing McGovern will now make them even go on furthermore on the side of caution when it comes to preseason game action. And what I mean by that is 17 sees even less of the field, if the field at all, because when you're without your center, that's a big piece that when the games don't ultimately matter and you trust your team and you trust your line, things like that. Now your Deion Dawkins is going to see less of the field. Now your Spencer Brown's going to see less of the field. Two guys that either have injury history and or are starting to get longer in the tooth, one for the other kind of deal. It's like, give these guys even more added rest. Let them be more fresh going into the season. We don't need to see, I always think of, what was it? I think it was the preseason week 2 game at Pittsburgh 2 or 3 years ago, whenever it was, where we saw 17 in the first team offense out there for an entire first half. And I was like, what are we doing? Like, I understood that McDermott had a plan, and I understood, I think, if I recall correctly, it changed a little bit because their first 2 series were 3 and outs maybe, or whatever it was. And it was like an in the moment decision. Like, we're playing an entire half now. And it's like, let's not, like, let's just not do any of that. Let's ride this, like, stick to your plan for one, and two, I want to see 17 on the field as little as possible. And furthermore, I want to see the key players of that offensive line being on the field as little as possible. Those two things need to be attached forever. And when you have a missing piece of your offensive line, that to me is the perfect excuse of, all right, our quarterback's not on the field, and then any other key offensive lineman is no longer on the field. That's it. If you are Spencer Brown, Deion Dawkins, McGovern, and Osiris Torrance, you will not see a snap of this preseason until all of you are healthy. You have to let your left guard battle play out, so those guys are going to see some snaps because you just need to see live reps. But that's understandable because those individuals have not yet earned that attachment to 17 and the rest of the offensive line. And then even the sprinkle and cherry on top of that means James Cook is not going to play anymore, because it's just like all of these things matter and they all need to coexist. That's what makes football great. It is not a one-man sport. It's why QB wins is the dumbest stat of all time and things of that nature. It's like all of these things are connected and matter in unison. So when you have one thing like McGovern just needing to rest up, needing to get 100% again or as close to it as possible, and you have all these meaningless games coming up, it's like all the other things that matter around him also should be just resting and getting ready, and then let those reps with all of those other players exist in practice, where then, as you said so perfectly, SVPG is getting some live reps with the ones. Anyone else you have at the potential depth center position is getting live reps with the ones, because that is your best look at them as, are they worth this roster spot? Or, as again you said, and I think this is just a great discussion to have, it's like, hey, these guys aren't it. We don't think we'll lose them, and maybe you could stash one of them on the practice squad. And then from there, you just go heavier with the left guard. You live with what you have at center, technically on the depth chart. And then if, God forbid, an injury happened at the position, you do have Alec Anderson there, but then also a fully comfortable, capable starting left guard there, where you just shift over and do things like that. I think this is a true blessing in disguise, and I hope that they even go further than just, hey, we're exploring the backup options, and even dive into this is the reason why we don't play 17 for, all of the guys. It's like, this is why when we're playing preseason week 1, you're not seeing any of them. This is why preseason week 2, you're not seeing any of them. It's like, I love that idea, because I think how do I say this? I think there's value in some teams playing their ones. The Bills are not one of those teams. The Rams are not one of those teams. The Ravens are not one of those teams. The Chiefs are not one of those. When you are a foundationally established team with your quarterback, with your line, with everything like that, you are not playing your ones. When you're the Cardinals, when you're the Raiders, when you're the
Titans,
Titans. Play your ones. Make fans get excited about their quarterback seeing base coverages and BS things, and let them think that Carson Beck is the guy of the future, even though he's just seeing shell cover 3 and knows, hey, 3-step drop, hit the out, whatever. Like, cool. That's great. But when you're the Bills and those teams, you don't need to see any of those guys. Wait until week 1, because that's when you want to see them and want to see them do well. And the best thing you can do for them is make sure they're healthy getting there.
If you ever want to know why preseason games are meaningless, just remind yourself that in 2018, Nathan Peterman beat out Josh Allen in a quarterback competition because of how his stats were in preseason. Yeah. And that lasted all of 2 quarters in the regular season before they had to get him out of there. All right. A couple more things I want to hit on before we get out of here, Luka. Caleb Alarm's Orr continues just to shine. This kid's going to be on the field. There was a play that I saw, I believe it was a red and blue. I saw a video of it where he was running one-on-one with James Cook and like stayed with him stride for stride and broke it up. You just love that. And he's running at Mike almost exclusively. And if you're paying attention, Terrell Bernard is now running at Will, and Dorian Williams is running at Mike. So Dorian, buddy, it's like that scene in Jurassic Park where the dinosaurs coming up, like objects in mirror closer than they appear, and the dinosaur is like right there. That's where Caleb Alarm's Orr is for your job. I have a hard time seeing the Bills being super patient with someone like Dorian Williams, who did find a niche role last year. But when you have this kid Alarm's Orr, who seems to check all the boxes, and by the way, the attitude box too, this is one of those situations where, and it's important to keep in mind, he was a draft pick of this regime, knowing what the scheme was. I think it's only a matter of time before he's out snapping Dorian Williams pretty comfortable, Luka.
Yeah, I mean, I think Caleb Alarm's Orr, barring anything crazy we see during live reps, because he's going to be getting early live looks in preseason games, I would assume, at the Mike position. I think it's almost, without knowing it for sure, become his job to lose, which is crazy to say about a day 3 pick guy. But I mean, everything you see about him, especially like he's becoming Christian Benford lore-esque, where you're just like, oh, what is this we got on day 3 that has become starting caliber right out the gate? You know, he went to a more respectable football school, we'll call it, at TCU, but still, regardless, it's more than just a quarter found in the cushions. This is full on lost dollar bills you're finding in the cushion, it feels like. And then from there, I love your point about you're not going to be patient with what you have from Dorian Williams for a multitude of reasons. One, you've seen years out of him now to understand better what he is. And you understand where his pros are, his cons are, what his ceiling is, so on and so forth. And you mentioned the niche role he found that he excelled at last year. It feels like Dorian Williams is actually your conventional Sam style linebacker, where you want him on strong side, run defending downhill first, behind him doesn't matter. And ultimately, you in this style of defense, he's going to become package-based usage and things like that, and that's perfect. And then if injuries were to come up, he's still a guy you can at least somewhat trust to fill a role, because he understands what his job would be at whatever said position, whether it's Will, whether it's Mike. And from there, I think taking the Mike load off of Terrell Bernard's plate and allowing him to be just that more freelance style off-ball linebacker, I think we're going to even potentially see a better version of him. I think there's a lot that we haven't seen out of him, or we've seen what we've seen out of Terrell Bernard, and you've liked what you've seen, but then also there's things about him that you don't like. And I think that simple little shift over and taking certain things off of his plate is going to excel all the things we like about the player, and really not even disguise, but just not ask of him to do stuff that he just doesn't excel at. And that probably will do a couple things for him. One, help him stay healthier, for one. And two, just allow him to play more confidently, that as long as he's at better health, full health, we'll get that higher end Terrell Bernard that we've seen in the past, in less of flashes and more in just consistency. And that is huge because consistency at the linebacker position as a whole is something that we've missed since we saw 49 walk out the building, essentially. And even then, as much as you and I liked Edmonds, it wasn't like he was, the staple of consistency. It was just that was the most consistent we had seen at linebacker in some time. And Milano had done great too, but then Milano's consistency, I guess, would come down more to injuries. You just don't see enough of it for a long enough stretch of time. I think the most you got out of him was like a season plus, and then and eventually something would come up, unfortunately for him. So it's just, I love that Alarms Or is kind of breathing new life into a position that it felt like you and I, at least I would say, were accepting going into training camp. Hey, this is not going to be something to write home about, but we're just going to be okay with it because it's new system that seems like it's built okay around them, to all of a sudden you might have a difference maker in Alarms More. And Terrell Bernard moving over to Will, it seems like it could be an absolute, not even in disguise blessing. It's going to be a blessing, period. And all of us, that position's becoming a position of strength, with then your outside linebackers being Rousseau and Chubb, who feel very good for that. And Michael Hoyt being a depth piece for that style position. That is awesome, because that, if anyone watches football and understands how he played with the Rams, that's more of the natural position he was playing with them, and it was working pretty damn well for them. So there's just a lot to love just by this single chess piece, Josh. I bring it up with like Sabres all the time. You lose one player and all of a sudden people don't fill their roles. I think in years past, you lose one receiver, all of a sudden everyone's not in a spot they need to be, but you slide that one chess piece in and naturally everyone else falls where they need to be, and you'll notice and reap the benefits everywhere. This kind of has that vibe to it, that as long as it is as good as it seems early on, this could be a beautiful thing.
And we know Dorian Williams as a first off the bench linebacker. That's probably the ideal role for him, like a sub-package blitzer type. Okay, so you mentioned something interesting, and that's where we're going to transition to for really our last topic of the show. You mentioned Michael Hoyt, and his recovery has been remarkable. By all accounts, he's on track to be ready to go by the opener. And you mentioned Bradley Chubb and Gregory Rousseau, and you have your highest pick in the second round, TJ Parker there. One name that got connected to the Bills this week on Instagram, and Deion Dawkins was getting in there, and Von Miller. Von Miller had 9 sacks last year. I don't know that I love the fit, but I also don't think I hate it. I don't need it. That's kind of where I'm at. I want to take your temperature on it. The one thing I know about Von Miller is this. I don't think you're getting the 2022 version of Von Miller, who came in and sacked Matthew Stafford twice in his debut. The post ACL injury version of Von Miller has not been that. But whatever you get out of Von Miller, whatever it is, let's say he's your fourth best edge, he's not going to shrink in the moment of the big game. He has played his best ball at times in the big games. And if the Bills make a playoff run like we expect them to do, you get to the AFC Championship game and all of a sudden Bradley Chubb is out, and you're looking at Greg Rousseau, a rookie in TJ Parker, having a Von Miller who has been in those situations throughout his career, has won a Super Bowl MVP. He's not going to blink at being asked to come in and rush Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow in that situation. In fact, he might actually raise his game. As a situational pass rusher, Luka, does the Von Miller idea interest you? I really don't know, because also I feel like it could stunt the growth of TJ Parker. It's an odd fit, but I don't want to say I hate it. Where are you at on Von Miller?
So how do I put this? Interest is not the word I'd put to it. Disinterested is definitely not the word I'd put to it. It's one of those, I think there's a couple things that go into this. So if we're going to count outside linebacker as part of the defensive line, since for all of intents and purposes, they're going to be lining up on the line of scrimmage, you now have 5 defensive linemen you will have on the field every snap for the most part. In your base D. So right there, you're looking at your starters being Bradley Chubb, Gregory Rousseau on the edges, and then TJ Sanders, Dayon Walker, and Ed Oliver. That is what you're realistically looking at. From there, you are being responsible by having a depth guy for each one of those positions. Your outside linebackers, maybe you shuffle around where you just have 2 in total. Whether they favor a side or not doesn't necessarily matter as much, but ultimately you need to be responsible with it. So you're looking at Zane Durant, Dwayne Carter, interior at least. From there, there's probably another interior defensive end that you have somewhere.
Jackson, I would guess.
Yeah, that would make sense. Maybe Fidarian Mathis cracks the code there. Who knows? And then from your outside linebacker position, you're looking at Michael Hoyt, of course, and then TJ Parker. So that math, that is 10 players. That is 10. So how many resources are you ultimately going to allocate to the defensive line? I don't know how many more they go past that. And really it comes down to where else can you help us? Because that's the special teams discussion, of course, where you have a guy like Javon Solomon who assists in that world. And, are you concerned about your nose tackle position and or one of your interior DE spots that it's like, hey, we need to have that 5th guy there, whatever, or 3rd or 5th, whatever you want to call it. So I will be very fascinated how they handle the actual math of the roster in that case. What I would say is I don't hate the idea of Von Miller being someone that's like, I don't think anyone's calling for him. I don't think anyone's going. It's like you get to roster cut down day, you reassess your roster, and then it's like, hey, Von, do you want to be in house on a practice squad around the facility and be someone that's willing to take the call if matters? He absolutely could not be a player that's willing to do that. Let me just be transparent about that. And I personally don't think he would. I think he's got other things he wants to do. He's got, I'm sure, side businesses, of course. He's got his chicken farm or whatever, and then other things that it's like he's got things he wants to do that I don't think that interests him. But maybe being like, hey, call me when you got a roster spot for me, things of that nature. But the cherry on top of this all is I love that people bring up his 9 sacks. And I had to look this up on purpose because I recall a couple of these, and I know he came on hot late in the season and stuff. And if you just look at the teams, I'm only going to name the teams of which he got at least one dedicated sack for, or, one credited sack. And it was against the Raiders week 3. It was against the Chargers week 5, where they were already starting to have offensive line issues. It was against the Dolphins week 11. It was against the Vikings week 14. It was against the Giants week 15. And then 17 and 18 weeks, you have the Cowboys and then the Eagles, and the Eagles are resting everyone under the sun that week. Mm-hmm. So what my point is I don't think you're bringing a guy in like him to produce. You're bringing him in, break glass in case of emergency. Someone that I think your mentality point of this is spot on. He will not cower in the opportunity. He would be someone you could ask of to fill the role, fill the spot, be confident that he can do what he can. But also, I would not be sitting there watching him play and think even remotely he's touching someone of note, especially if he's got a left tackle or right tackle across from him that is worth their weight in gold. So it's a situation where I think weeks 1 through 15. I don't need to see Von Miller active on game days. I don't need to see that. But if you're starting to get a little thin at the outside linebacker position and you're approaching week 18 and wild card weekend, if you have to play that week, which I would assume for all intents and purposes, based on how the Bills seasons have come and gone, they're going to be playing. It's like I could maybe use him as my 5th option on the edge that week. It's like, oh, these guys are, a little bit banged up and or they're winded during the game, whatever. You can ask Von Miller to tap in for 10, 12 snaps. And I'm feeling better about him rather than a Javon Solomon, who I still am not sure what we have out of him, or Landon Jackson or whatever. Like, there are guys that I think weeks 1 through 15, those are the individuals I'd rather see. And then maybe my idea of this would change by that point in time, that it's like, no, I still would rather Landon Jackson or Javon Solomon or whoever being active on game day come playoffs. But then also there could be a time where it's like, hey, Von, you want to take one more go at this? We're going to be the 2 seed. We're going to be the 3 seed. We're going to be the 5 seed, whatever. We really need to solidify that 5th outside linebacker position. Do you want to be active on game days come playoffs and maybe, play 10 to 12 reps and make whatever X amount of dollars? Like, that is what the Von Miller idea is to me at best. I don't look at it as going into the season, Von Miller being on this roster. I don't think that makes sense. I don't think that makes sense for the player as well. Like, I don't see where that makes sense unless he's itching and we just haven't heard anything about it. From a Bills perspective, though, I don't hate the idea as we get into the cold months, as we approach January and we get into those games that we ultimately know we need to get over the hump. It's like, who would I rather trust being the guy to fill in those 10 random snaps of a game, Von Miller or Landon Jackson? As I sit here right now on August 9th or 10th when you're listening or later, I think at this point in time, I would trust Von Miller in those reps.
Yeah, and the practice squad idea is so interesting because you and I grew up in an era where practice squad was basically like 9 guys that you don't really care about until they get called up and you're like, oh, and every once in a while you strike gold with like a Jabari Greer or something like that. But nowadays, with the new practice squad rules, it can be kind of significant, especially with some of the vet rules that are out there. Jordan Poyer was on the Bills practice squad at the beginning of last year and ended up being a very important player for them when it was revealed that Taylor Rapp could no longer run. And, you needed some veteran back there next to Cole Bishop, and he was way more up for the job than Damar Hamlin or any of the other options last year. Where I get tied up with this is, while I love Jordan Poyer and believe he is a future Wall of Famer for the Bills, Von Miller, a shout out to the NFL Hall of Fame, is a first ballot Hall of Famer whenever he decides to retire, whatever that minimum time frame is. I don't know if it's even disrespectful, and I'm certainly not meaning it as disrespectful, to suggest that would Von Miller be willing to go to a practice squad at this stage of his career. If he was, that's a perfect fit. It checks every box of don't get him hurt. He's there if you need him, and he can stay in football shape. I don't know that I want to use a roster spot on Von Miller at this point in time. But it'll be interesting to track to see how that goes, because that's definitely something where he loves the organization. He has a winning mindset, and maybe having him around some young players like TJ Parker, Landon Jackson, TJ Sanders, Deion Walker could be a good thing for the Bills. All right, Luka, these Buffalo Bills take the field for real this weekend as they are taking on the Carolina Panthers in the first game action at new Highmark Stadium on Saturday at 1 p.m. We are going to be back next week talking about all things from that preseason game. Maybe we'll have an update on Connor McGovern, an update on Ty Johnson. Is Max Harrison back practicing yet? We know he has a lower leg injury. Cole Bishop went down at a red and blue scrimmage, but doesn't seem like there's too much concerning coming out of there. We'll have an update on all that, what's going on with some of these position battles, what are our biggest takeaways from the preseason game. All of that to look forward to. For Luka, I am Josh McCarty. We will talk to you next week on Bills Chat.